For those of you who are just joining us, I'd like to welcome you to the Newsroom at Home webinar on wildfire gardening. So my name is Charnel Ross, and I am the marketing manager here at Bay Area News Group. So before we get started into the conversation, I do want to remind you that if you have any questions throughout the webinar, please use the Q&A feature found in your Zoom toolbar at the bottom. We will do our best to answer those questions towards the end of the webinar. We have a couple presentations to go through in this webinar, so if you just sit tight with us, we will have some time at the end to answer any questions that you guys have. Also, if you want to leave comments, say hello, please feel free to do so in that chat feature to your right. We do welcome any type of engagement throughout the webinar as well. So all right, let's go ahead and jump right in. I'd like to introduce our host for this hour, Bay Area News Group's Pets and Wildlife columnist, Joan Morris. Hey, Joan, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Charnel. And thanks to all those joining us today for this incredibly important webinar, I think, that's going to be talking about protecting ourselves and our homes and communities from wildfire. And as we're seeing year after year, and again this year, wildfire is an incredibly devastating, life-destroying element that in some cases can be prevented or lessened. And so we're going to talk today about things that we personally can do to help secure our own homes. So we're joined today by two experts on the subject. We have Doug Mosher, who is the program manager for Oakland Community Preparedness and Response, and Marilyn Saarni, a Rescape qualified professional and Contra Costa Master Gardener. Doug, why don't you introduce yourself and then we'll go on.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Bay Area News Group. Really appreciate this opportunity to talk this morning. I'm going to be addressing emergency preparedness and wildfire preparedness. I'm a volunteer with the Oakland Firesafe Council, and the Firesafe Council, despite its name Oakland, we actually cover Alameda County. And the Firesafe Council works on a lot of different preventative projects and programs, including vegetation management and working with local and city governments to have better laws around vegetation and so on. And the Firesafe Council also has created our program that I'm going to cover called Oakland Community Preparedness and Response. And it's education for wildfire preparedness and responding and recovering after a disaster.
Great. And Marilyn, why don't you introduce yourself? And you're on mute.
I'm Marilyn Saarni. I have a certification from Rescape in regenerative resilient firescaping. I'm also serving on the Wildcat Canyon Fire Response Group, which is a Contra Costa citizen group dealing with evacuations, wildfire risks, and preparing. And then I'm also a UC Master Gardener volunteer with Contra Costa County, and this is a focus of my research and for their benefit as well. And what else? I'm a former geologist. I worked with climate scientists for several decades, and I want to tell you guys what we're seeing now is predicted in models in the early 90s, these extreme catastrophic wildfires. So that's enough.
Great. Well, thank you both for joining us. And I'm going to throw it over to Doug. He's got a presentation on preparedness and response.
Thank you, Joan. Looking good?
Yep.
So our program, again, of the Oakland Fire Safe Council is called Oakland Community Preparedness and Response. It's a bit of a mouthful. We abbreviate it as OCP&R. I'm just going to spend a few seconds explaining what our program entails. So really, again, it's a community program of our Fire Safe Council, nonprofit organization, to provide education in the form of workshops, materials, and support. So it's all about education to increase disaster preparedness and improve disaster response capabilities. We created this initially for Oakland, but really it's applicable to just about everyone in the Bay Area. We're all in the same situation, really, in terms of potential disasters like a wildfire. We received some grants, funding from CAL FIRE, California Fire Foundation, and some funding from the City of Oakland to build our program. And what do we cover? Well, we cover what are really the sort of top 10, if you will, steps or actions that we feel that everyone should take to be prepared for a disaster like a wildfire. And those actions include organizing your neighborhoods, your communities. We feel that's very important. Understanding alerts and notifications, having your evacuation plans, go bags, stay boxes, knowing how to prepare and respond to power outages, PG&E, public safety power shutoffs, for example, hardening your homes or your residents against wildfire and earthquake. I'm going to cover the wildfire part in a bit. And then responding during a disaster and safety after disaster. So again, it's kind of like the top things that everybody should do. All of our information is online on our website. The link will be in the chat session. We have guides, 23 different guides, more detailed on various topics, including these on this page and more. And we do have some guides on firescaping. Here are 3 of them. As an example, hardening your home or your residence against wildfire, defensible space, and fire safe planting checklists. So we've created these guides by basically taking information from a lot of different sources and experts and putting this information in what we hope is a fairly easy to read, digestible format. Our guides are 1-page PDF files you can view, download, or print. So please check them out. So the process flow I'm going to go through in terms of disaster preparedness and response is really very basic. You organize and prepare before an emergency, you respond during an emergency, and recover after emergency. And I think everybody can understand that, but the important concept here to really get across is that you have to organize and prepare before that emergency takes place. It does no good trying to prepare while a wildfire is approaching or while an earthquake is taking place. So you have to do the work, take the time, do the work before, which really means now. And why do we need to be prepared? So this is a map of basically Oakland, Berkeley. But again, this applies to much of the Bay Area. We have zones that have been defined by CAL FIRE and Cal Office of Emergency Services. These are, and this is around the state, but these are in yellow, the high fire hazard severity zones, and in red, the very high fire hazard severity zones. And it's basically Oakland, Berkeley Hills, again, all the way along the East Bay, and then there are corresponding areas around the rest of the Bay and North Bay. But these are the areas that are undetermined because of vegetation load, because of the topology, the hillsides, and those winds that can come out of the east, the Diablo winds, that have been marked as high or very high. And just to note that this map is a couple years old, and these are in the process of being updated. And everybody expects that these areas are going to grow. So they're going to expand because of climate change, because of drought, because of very dry vegetation and so on. These areas are just getting larger. And then in terms of at least the East Bay, we know we have the Hayward Fault, which is statistically speaking, over the last 7 centuries, a bit overdue for a major quake. Of course, with an earthquake, one never knows, but and throughout the Bay, of course, we have many other faults that also pose a potential hazard and could cause an emergency. And there are other disasters that can happen. We have refineries, we have ports, we have airports and so on. So really we have several threats that we need to understand and do the best we can to prepare for around the Bay Area. We also need to be prepared because in essence, we respond first, and we being you and I, the public, or as the CERT training, which is emergency response training, says, you are the help until help arrives. And that help arriving may be several days, or longer, depending on the magnitude of the disaster and where our first responders are going to be engaged. So we really, as the public, need to be able to care for ourselves and our neighbors and our families, and to effectively respond to a large scale emergency like a wildfire requires us to be prepared. Just to note that while we respond first is a catchy tagline, most of us are not first responder professionals. Now, you may be a firefighter or law enforcement, but most of us aren't. So we have to know the limitations of what we're trained and able to do. So starting with that first section in that flow, talk this morning about preparing for an emergency. So we really emphasize being organized and being ready. And I'm not going to cover the neighborhood organization or community organization, but we do have a guide on that, our first guide, and we encourage folks to take a look at that because, again, organized neighborhoods or communities are very important for many different reasons. But I'm going to cover alerts and notifications because those are also very important to understand what's happening during and after an event like a wildfire. Every county has their own alert system. I only have a few of these here. I apologize, but for example, AC is Alameda County, AC Gov, CWS, as for Contra Costa County, or Santa Clara County, San Mateo, Marin, SF. So every county has an alert system that you should sign up for in your own county. And that alert system will provide notices and warnings and instructions to your home phone, to your cell phone, text, by email, and so on. So a variety of different ways to get that out to you. Please make sure you're signed up for your county alert system. Very important. There are also what are called WEA, W-E-A, cell wireless emergency alerts that can get directed to your cell phone. Very targeted alerts. You don't have to do anything to receive those. For the most part, they come in when there's a disaster, a local disaster. There's also social media. Nixle is another system like the county alerts. There's Twitter, Citizen, Nextdoor, and so on. Those are other avenues where you can receive important information, alerts and notifications. And then there are two-way radio networks. We have created one for the Oakland area. There are others around the Bay Area that provide the ability to communicate if cellular phones aren't working, and cell phone service is not guaranteed in a major disaster like a wildfire. That's important to understand. Radio, AM, FM radio, very important still. In this age of the internet, everybody should have a small portable AM, FM, NOAA weather radio, preferably with batteries, although they have hand crank and solar and so on. But have one and know what stations to listen to, including KCBS, KQED. Those are our emergency alert system stations, and they're relayed to other stations, and that's where you'll find emergency information, as well as on corresponding TV stations. So it should go without saying, but I'll say it anyway. Follow all instructions given by police, fire, or emergency responders that you receive over these alert systems. We do have a guide. Our guide number 2 on our website is on notifications and warnings, and also covers red flag warnings on the back side of the guide. Very important. We just had a red flag warning yesterday in the East Bay Hills. Thankfully, it didn't amount to too much in terms of wind, but it's very important. Red flag warnings are quite serious, and everyone should understand what to do, how to prepare, and how to react. Creating a disaster evacuation plan, again, one of the steps that we feel is very important and encourage everybody to do. I'm not going to go through all of these. Again, we have a guide on this, or several guides actually, but basically study a map, know all of your escape routes out of your neighborhood or where you're working, because you never know in a disaster, a wildfire, what direction is that fire coming from? Where is it? Are trees down? Are power lines down? You just don't know until the event takes place what escape route is going to be available to you. So you really need to know pretty much every way out if you can. Zone Haven is a new application. It's now throughout Alameda County, parts of Contra Costa County, Marin, San Mateo County, parts of Santa Clara County, and it's expanding throughout the site. It allows firefighters and emergency operations to manage evacuations by zone. Everybody is in a small zone, a defined zone. So we have a link on this, go to community.zonehaven.com, put your address in if Zone Haven is in your county, and know your zone, learn it, write it down. And there's an example of an Oakland zone number. So very important. And also the public will receive information via Zone Haven on what's going on, what their status is, should they stay, should they go. Go bags, we have information on that. Assisting neighbors, very important. Checklist of items to grab. Certainly you don't want to be running around at the last minute, trying to know what to get. So, come up with those lists beforehand. Pets, having carriers, meeting locations to reunite with family members. All this is very important, and it's on our website and many other websites. But please take a look and do this work to create your plan for your family, and then practice. So again, our guide number 5, evacuation planning, and our guide number 23 is on Zone Haven. So take a look at those. So I'm going to show a short video here on embers, so kind of getting into the fire danger and what we can do to help protect against them. There's no sound to this video, but this is in a obviously controlled environment, a warehouse. They have an ember machine generator throwing embers against a mock-up of a house, and you can see that the dried mulch, dead plants, in front of the house, those embers have caught that on fire. That those flames transfer, up to the siding, to the wood deck, to the fence that's alongside the house, up into the eaves, into the roof, and that house is now essentially on fire. So the point of this video, and a lot of studies have happened, especially over the past few years, with our increased number of wildfires, is that embers start a majority of home fires during a wildfire or firestorm. And those embers can get blown for miles, firebrands, burning embers. So you really have to ensure that you're protecting your property and your home against those embers, as well as, of course, direct flame and radiant heat will start structures on fires also. But again, those embers are fairly insidious and need to be, you need to protect against them. So what kind of things can you do? Well, and Marilyn's going to cover this in more detail, but you certainly want to create at least 5 feet of no combustibles around your home. That's what we call that, or that's called zone 0 in this zone system around your structure. So nothing that'll burn in that area. Limiting branches up 6 feet or more from the ground, prevents flames from growing up into the crown of trees. No overhanging limbs within 10 feet above your roof. Vent screens, again, because of those embers can be small, they can get into crawl space vents, eave vents, and so on, and they can start a fire inside your home. So it's highly recommended to either cover those with a mesh. You can do that on your own, or you can buy commercial vents that are ember proof and that will essentially shut off and prevent those embers from getting into your home. But that's something that you can certainly do around your house to make it more fire safe. Removing flammables on or under porches, very important, and fences. If you have a fence, it should have at least a non-combustible section up against your home, either brick, metal, mortar, and so on. Again, you saw in that video how a wood fence up to your home can just transfer flames up to it. Ideally, the entire fence would be non-combustible, but sometimes that's hard to do. Certainly keep your gutters clean, your roof clean, those dry needles, leaves in your gutters. When those embers land in there, they will start, they will start those on fire, and that can transfer into your roof or into a siding on a second floor. So those need to be regularly cleaned. Your roof should be Class A rated. That's generally code. And tempered double pane windows are ideal. Please check out our guide, number 9, Home Hardening for Wildfire. But I don't live in the hills and wildland urban interface, and we addressed this previously a little bit. We hear that a lot. It's understandable. People who don't live in the hilly areas may not be as concerned about the risk of wildfire. Well, tragically, this is Coffey Park from the Tubbs fire in 2017. You can see it's a very flat area. It wasn't next to a park. And you can see what a firestorm, a wind-driven firestorm did. So there's a lot of fuel in homes that will burn. And so really, everyone listening should be concerned about wildfire and should prepare for it, really, no matter where you live. And also earthquake, if there, not if, but when there is a major earthquake, that earthquake will start many fires as well. Broken gas lines, down power lines. If it's a windy day, those can turn into wildfires as well, no matter where throughout the Bay Area. So in our regular workshop that we provide, and would love to do that for your neighborhood group or organization, it's an hour. We talk about responding during an emergency, taking action, being safe, and recovering afterwards, being aware and being helpful. Again, we have guides on that, and we'd love to provide our workshop to you. So your next steps, this is your homework, basically register for your county alert system if you haven't already, and then take these steps that are really the most important to prepare. Finally, if you can, take additional training. CERT is a nationwide FEMA program for emergency preparedness. It's excellent if you can do that. We have a checklist on our website that'll help you through these steps. Take a look at that, tick them off, and certainly at least, again, the most important preparedness actions. Finally, last slide. Take these preparedness steps one at a time. I know this can sound very overwhelming, and some people look at it and just kind of throw up their hands and too much. So break things down, do them one step at a time. Sign up for your alert, tick that off, pat yourself on the back, and then work on the next small step. And remember, anything you do in terms of preparedness, you're better off than before. Review the information on our website. There are a lot of other great websites, Listos, California, ready.gov. Your county has great information. PG&E has great information on preparedness and response. So if you can, check all those out. Again, it's all good. If your friends and neighbors haven't prepared, encourage them to do so. We're all in this together. And reach out to us, certainly, if you have any questions and how we can help. Again, we'd love to provide our 1-hour workshop for your neighborhood group or your organization. So thank you. thank you very much, and everyone, please be safe.
Thanks, Doug. This is all very informative, and I know now I'm all excited about going and getting prepared. And I know in an hour I won't be as excited, but hopefully we will all take this seriously and get started. I like your idea of just taking it one tiny step at a time. I can do that. So now we're going to turn to Marilyn, who's going to talk about, we've already had some questions about trees and mulch and whether green plants will burn and things like that. So she's going to be addressing some of those issues in her presentation. So Marilyn.
Let me get my presentation up. There we go. Hi, I'm Marilyn Saarni. And as I already mentioned, I have taken training from Rescape and Resilient Regenerative Firescaping, but this has been an interest for quite a while because I do live in a very high wildfire zone. And some years ago, I became aware that there were some deficiencies in our local communities preparing for wildfire. Okay, come on. Sorry, I'm gonna have to close a couple of things here. Whoops, sorry, I'll be right back. I knocked out all of my my notes there. So as I wanted everyone to think about keeping in mind before you select and plant that up to 90% of the homes in the WUI zone are destroyed by flying embers, and you have to choose plants keeping this in mind and laying out your garden, everything. The current fire safety standards call for 3 zones, and I'm going to classify recommended plants by zones. So in zone 0, which is 0 to 5 feet, that's called the ember resistant zone. And zone 1 is 5 to 30 feet, lean, clean, and green. Zone 2 is 30 to 100 feet, which is the reduced fuel zone. I am having, there we go, sorry. So here's something, here's a first step, and you'll have to take it in steps. Get rid of all of your dangerous plants. I have pictures there. Those are thuja. The first column is a nice green, healthy looking thuja. The second one underneath is what it's inside. That is why those plants are so dangerous. The palm trees I have pictured there have these dead skirts. They're called torch plants by firemen because they explode and they throw embers far away from the original fire. They are responsible for several fires in Southern California on a routine basis. And the next picture is junipers. Everything lands in junipers. They're heavy debris collectors, and then they catch everything, not only from their own debris generation, but they capture all the garbage blowing around. The lower right is a lavender that's turned woody. Lavenders don't have to be a fire risk, but once they turn woody, they become that. Here's some well-designed safe entries. I want you to show you that you can have a beautiful garden and be safe. And I also want to show you what is a safe entry. These are wide vision, open vision lines for firefighters. You have good staging areas for firefighters to drop equipment. These plantings are low flammability. And as you can see, there's a lot of open space. The lower right one, I think, is notable because they have a high-risk building. It's an old Berkeley wood shingle classic, but they knew they're in a very high wildfire area, and they have done this front, which is very elegant, and everything's very easy for firemen to come in and protect their high-risk building. So choosing the right plant for the right spot. I've bolded the characteristics you're going to look for. Right now, Plant lists are not reliable. There is no uniform scientific experiment system for assessing these plants. And of course, the condition of the plant itself can be highly variable. So I want to point out specifically for tree choosing, it's a big investment for you. You want to look for deciduous. You want a tree that doesn't litter and that you can manage the litter. You want smooth bark. Peeling barks catch embers and deep crevice bark too. You want leaves and stems that don't have those aromatics. Those indicate volatile oils. And lush and moist leaves are obviously well hydrated. They're going to resist catching fire. Silver gray leaves are actually potentially indicators of high mineral content, which reduces flammability. I'm going to say this probably several times. All conifers are high-risk choices in the very high wildfire zone because they typically litter heavily. There are a few that don't litter heavily, by the way, and volatile oils. When it comes to firescaping, less is more. Yes, you're going to have to edit your garden. I highly recommend falling in love with rocks. As a geologist, of course, that was easy for me to do. Go out and collect rocks. It's legal in certain places in U.S. Forest Services. Check with the Forest Service Department, and you may need to get a permit. Yes, you can still support wildlife. I want to do that. I want to talk about sizes of plants that you put in, especially trees and shrubs. This is a great diagram. I want people to take a tape measure out. You have to plant considering mature size. You have to leave gaps between tree canopies and shrub canopies. And you have to remember, this is why I say take a tape measure out. A 25-foot tree, which is considered small, is taller than a 2-story house. So on a carefully planted landscape, strategies you're going to use are avoiding any continuous ranges of plant fuels. And this is a time when you can look at your infrastructure for wide, gracious paths. Rain gardens, this is when you can take the water that comes off your roof, get it into the ground and help your ecosystem. Raised beds with non-flammable materials are also breaks. And hey, you can put in water features like fountains or ponds. Use plants. Well, I'm just going to say everything's about maintenance. Once you've got your garden planted, you have to select for what you can maintain. And I want you all to act like experimentalists. If it doesn't work, if you can't maintain it, yank it. And then, yes, of course, you always want to promote sustainability. I'm going to talk about slopes because it's actually a big concern when you're choosing your plants and laying out your garden. Slopes are typical of very high wildfire zones. And if your house is built at the top of a slope, it is at highest risk of all homes in the area. And I want to recommend this image, this article. It'll be in the resource list later. What it is you have to, if you live at the top of a slope, you're going to have to prioritize slope work. It's costly. You have to put in infrastructure. You need to limb up those trees, unlike the rest of your yard where you could do 6 feet maybe. You're going to have to go to 12 feet or more. You have to take out understories. And you need to break up the canopy so it's not continuous. Otherwise, if you get a canopy fire, which is, by the way, I didn't mention, but flames get higher on slopes. That's the problem. They go up the slope faster, heat rises. They go up the slope faster, the flame height gets higher. And that is why the slopes are so particularly dangerous. The winds are much more fierce. You may want to think of taking all trees out, especially if they're conifers. And if you should happen to do this, you're going to have to take care of stabilizing the slope. You might want to do it in stages. Leave stumps to stabilize that slope. and take special precautions of drip irrigation, very slow drip irrigation, and as your new low plantings get established. If you have a deck, that's got to be a priority. You want to rebuild with non-flammable materials or Class A, which will burn, but after they don't burn easily. So plants for the zone 0. This is, for most of us, the best approach is going to be hard surfaces: cement, stone, gravel, and pavers. Bare dirt won't burn, and well-rotted compost is really just fine. This is where the firefighters are working. You don't want to get in the way of your firefighters. You want them to be able to save your house. So you're not going to trip them. You're not going to give them something that they have to juggle around, burning embers on the ground. And if you have wood siding, you may want to enlarge the zone. There are some very tiny ground covers that are good for this area. I wouldn't use them directly against the house, but the nature of these is that they don't get woody. You can walk on them. You can use blowers or brooms. And I do recommend looking into electrical blowers. I hate gas blowers. I never thought I'd even recommend a blower, but electric blowers with the variable can let you go around the whole house on a red flag day in about, well, depending on the size of your house, maybe half an hour, 45 minutes. Blowers are good on hard surfaces. They're not good on soils, but these particular ground covers resist blowers. You have to keep this zone, if you have plants in this zone, you have to keep them hydrated. Obviously, if you don't hydrate them, they turn into dead, flammable material. And your ability to maintain these, of course, are key. The zone 0 plants I'm talking about here are, I'm just going to talk about a couple of them. One is closely mowed watered lawn is a perfectly reasonable option. There are native turfs available now that grow slowly and use far less water than our old lawn turfs. I love elfin thyme. Just tons and tons of pollinators around, and it doesn't get woody and it stays very low, inch or less. I want to recommend the hardy ice plant that a lot of people don't know about. This is a teeny ice plant. It grows under an inch tall, has yellow flowers in the spring. You can walk on it and it just pops right back. Very good plant. Zone 1 is
Marilyn,
really,
I'm going to interrupt you just a second. We had a question from someone asking about artificial turf. My guess is that's not a good idea, but for fire, but I could be wrong.
Oh, well, let me answer that because it's timely. The issue with artificial turfs is they will melt. So you definitely cannot use it in that zone where the firemen are working. You could have a staging area like a big driveway or a patio with hard surfaces. You can have the artificial turf out of the way of where they have to defend. However, the turf is not going to start a fire and throw up embers, which is what we're looking for. We're trying to avoid making the fire worse. And so it's not a bad solution. It's more that you have to keep it away from where firefighters are working, because you don't want them landing on stuff that's goopy, and frankly, they're not going to walk on it. So good. I'm willing to do follow-up on that if anyone's curious. So lean, clean, and green. Yes, you're going to use water in this zone. You can just figure zone 1 and zone 0, you're going to use some water, and this is your priority zone. So all dead debris cleared, and this is your high maintenance area. Generally, you have you want wide paths and fire breaks, and as I mentioned already, you can have patios and pathways. I want you to think about a firefighter dragging a hose through this area. And you can understand that these firefighters have big bags on their backs. They're carrying heavy gear, flat, easy to walk on paths, no trippers, and easy sight lines. Because don't forget, in wildfire conditions, it's very smoky and it's not easy to see that very well. Vision lines are important in this zone. But you know, you can have a lot of fun with this. This is your artsy fartsy moment. If you have well-maintained lawn, that's actually really good. I already mentioned the native turfs that are doing so well nowadays. There are other lawn substitutes as well. If you have highly flammable plants in this zone, take them out. It's that simple. If you have hedges, that's another very high risk. You really can't have hedges. They're like wooden fences in a way. They carry the fire to the house, and you don't want any kind of a hedgy situation near a driveway where you may, or a path or a sidewalk where you're going to evacuate. In general, hedges just don't work well. And if you have vines, you need to really examine the situation. If embers can blow through underneath, you have a metal trellis, no wood trellis, you know, the vine may be a perfectly good option. I have a picture of Clematis armandii on this slide, and you can see that in 2 years it built up a nasty thatch. I've decided the only way to deal with Clematis armandii is to cut it to the ground every year or take it out. And I'm taking it out. So there are clearances between tree canopies and your understory. You may have a low succulent ground cover. I have some that actually grow about 18 inches, drown the weeds, they're fabulous. I have to maintain 6 feet clearance above that. I have a flat lot. If I'm on a slope, it has to be more. And then look at the plants you have near windows and near any entryways, because if in an evacuation, you don't want to have plants burning around you. And then, are you using hard materials or compost? You cannot be using bark, or especially shredded bark, or smaller, the wood chip type mulches in this area. Zone 1 plants, I highly recommend. They're just fabulous plants. And, you know, I just want you guys to know you're not going to be deprived going into a wildfire choice of plants. There are so many gorgeous plants out there, and many of them are California natives, and lots of them are fabulous pollinator attractants and so forth. Happens to be, I have here, I just noticed these are all my deer resistant plants too. Erigeum glaucus is a great one. The butterflies go crazy, doesn't grow more than about 12 inches, has pretty easy maintenance. It captures embers, but it won't catch fire, provided that you've got it hydrated well enough. Doesn't take a lot of water, but it does need some. The yarrow, Achillea millefolium similicose, is a very low growing yarrow. It has relatively little dieback that so many of the yarrows have. Drought resistant again. This one, it spreads slowly, and it has great form and great color of green. I love the Arctotis pink sugar. There's several Arctotis. Notice that silver leaf. It has mineral content, so it is less flammable. It has about a 2-year cycle before it just gets too much buildup to be easy to maintain. So I take sorts and replant. Heuchera maxima, I learned the hard way. I had to keep it hydrated. I just had to spend an hour cleaning my heuchera patch. It's actually a fairly drought resistant plant, but I underestimated how much water it needs in this drought situation. The ground's very dehydrated, and you do have to water. Ceanothus diamond heights, fabulous, grows close to a foot tall, drowns out the weeds. It gets very wide. One plant goes quite wide, so you probably want to put this to the outer edge of your 30-foot zone. Carex divulsa, sedges are generally less flammable than the bunch grasses. The bunch grasses tend to be very problematic. They actually provide quite a bit of fuel load. So you could try doing sedges as a focus point instead. And you need to get them 3 or 4 haircuts a year. So the maintenance is pretty manageable. Carex also grows about 12 inches, very manageable. And of course, succulents. Trees, I know people are going to want trees. I'm only putting 2 in here, which is desert willow. That's a California native from our southern deserts. Grows along streams and springs in that area, so it does need a little bit of water, but once it's established up here, probably most years, we'll see how it goes, doesn't need practically any summer water. It blooms and the pollinators go bananas, and it's a wonderful scaled tree, smooth bark, highly recommend it. It's gotten warmer here, so in the past it did not thrive, but it does now. Crepe myrtles, I mentioned this because you can get smooth barks, you can get every size and shape, and you can get a small one to fit your space or a big one. You get multi-trunk and all the different colors. Some of them have wonderful fall color. Pollinators love it, but don't get the peeling bark version. You want to avoid that. And then I'm running out of time, so I'm going to skip these others except to say Tucurium acremani is just phenomenal, highly drought resistant. Anyhow, zone 2 is a reduced fuel zone, 30 to 100 feet in some areas, especially with slopes. And if you own a larger property that's 150 feet, you can use large wood chip in this zone to control weeds up to about 3 inches. Maybe 4. I would be pretty cautious at that point because there have been really terrible wildfire situations where they put out the fire, but then it turned out there were very deep wood chip loads, and there were embers or coals really smoldering under the wood chip surface. And fires started up all over again as they came to the surface, and they weren't out. They took a lot of manpower to keep under control. They really didn't get put out until the rainy season started. I want to emphasize that in this area, you want to think about wide fire breaks because you need to go in and clean up all the time. And bare dirt and gravel, pavers, whatever is helpful for maintenance and defense. Slopes, stone walls, mentioned that, breaks up the flame height as it comes up the hill. You have to clear the understory debris routinely. I see people who go out and do it once and they think it's done. And you have to remove the debris. It's not like you can cut tall weeds and grasses and walk away. You have to clear it out and you have to remove it from your site. And so you need to thin the trees, break up the canopy. You can do trees and clusters and shrubs, but you have to break up the canopy. So if they catch fire, they're not spreading throughout. And then this is a great zone for a major veggie garden with herbs. Unfortunately, herbs often have aromatic oils and they get woody. And you can prune them back and so forth, or replace them if you put them in closer. But in this zone, you can be a little bit careful, but you have to get out the woody buildup. Raised beds make these easier to maintain. Maintenance is going to increase a lot. If you anyone who's already implementing this knows that your maintenance time is just going to triple probably. And this is with fewer plants theoretically. So if you get a raised bed and you don't have to bend over, that helps. For wilder zones, prune, thin those trees, large shrubs. I wanted to put these pictures in because on the left, you can see they put in walls. They have stone in front of their house. They have limbed up. And I really like what they did with the oaks there. They had cropped the grass really low. This year, they're not watering anything there. And they raked away and removed all the debris, the fuel load that's so dangerous. The embers hopefully will just blow past this house and the house can survive. The live oak grove there, they've actually done a really good job. Live oaks actually litter a lot. And so you can see, though they had done the work just 3 weeks before I got this image, that there's plenty of litter already, but they've limbed up just beautifully. And hopefully the embers will blow up. Their great vulnerability is between this oak grove and their house. They have big wood fence, and that fence is going to catch fire, and it's going to carry the fire to the house. So they're going to have to replace that with metal, cement board, or stone or similar. The one on the right is a beautiful job of using stone artfully. Zone 2 plants. So this is where you can have your big trees, right? And I have a list there. There's so many trees that are not flammable. Please don't be afraid to take out your highly flammable trees. But shade is an issue, or loss of shade. So I understand people doing in stages, but do use this zone for your big trees. By the way, talk to your neighbors before you plant. Don't put them at your fence lines. Don't endanger your neighbor's house and structures. I should have said that earlier. Ground covers up to 18 inches. No mow lawns, grasses. They are absolutely beautiful. They're actually very easy to take care of. They're drought resistant. Once a year, maybe twice a year, maintenance, haircuts. Before you select any plant, you need to research the maintenance requirements before you put it in. And if it's a plant that you're going to have to do more work with, make sure you have easy access to get at it. I found that's a bigger and bigger issue than I had realized, is being able to actually get at a plant. Because if you're crawling underneath plants, it gets pretty old, I'm telling you, as someone who's been crawling under plants. Alternatively, shrubs. You can put these in islands or clusters with paths. I love the garden in the lower left. And I want to recommend that Firescape from East Bay Mud. It's a great book. The center are eucalyptus trees on a slope. These guys pay quite a bit of money to keep it clean. They have crews that come in 3 or 4 times a year to clean out the understory, and once a year a major pruning. But they have done it right. And their big issue is if they remove those trees, it's going to create a highly unstable slope. And yes, they're in a very high wildfire. So, but they have done everything they can. The right-hand garden is a recent Firescaping. I think you can make it much more interesting, but I just wanted to say, even when you do these very simple, stark designs, they have their appeal. And this house will be as safe as any house in the area. So, questions and answers. So, there's a long list happening. Mulches. In the resource list, I have mulches. If you're in a very high and wildfire or high wildfire zone, you really should be using 2 kinds of mulches, and that is compost for zone 0 and zone 1 up to 30 feet from any structure. I didn't emphasize this. It's not just your house. It's if you have a shed or a greenhouse and so forth. So you have to keep that in mind as well. But you can use compost that has fertilizers in it. That's fine. The compost should have very well-rotted material, fine ingredients. I have seen some mulches, compost I haven't been happy with, because they actually left large fragments of bark in there, which sort of is like beside the point. Wildfire risk zones. Outside of that, the large wood chip has been shown to be the least flammable. Barks are problematic. The barks that, and you know, that bark that has the coloring, those black and red and green. unfortunately, that chemical makes it even more flammable. That is actually the worst stuff you can put on. Shredded bark has a lot of air inside of it, so it tends to catch fire very, very quickly too. Gorilla hair, which is redwood, shredded bark, is probably the worst. Let's see, other questions.
Marilyn, there were questions about, maybe it's contradictory when you were talking about, needing to hydrate, needing to water when we're in a drought. So how do you get that balance between saving water but not, creating a fire zone?
Well, thank you, Joan. I can't see all the questions and answer them too.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions.
Actually, I'm taking a shower every 3 days because frankly, I care more about my garden than I do smelling up my local environment. So there's that. And there are lots of things you can do in your house to lower your water use. I think probably everyone's aware of that. You can choose plants that need less water for their hydration. And if you fall in love with rocks, frankly, you're not watering as many plants. There's that piece of it. For the 0 to 30-foot zone, you need to keep that clean. This year, I did not plant a big vegetable garden. I'm usually running into trouble in the month of August, giving away excess tomatoes and squash and herbs and all this. And I just didn't do it this year. And vegetables are very thirsty. I prioritize trees. Trees are, you have to keep trees well hydrated because they're your biggest investment. And they affect the overall ecosystem of your garden the most. So also, of course, when trees start dying, they're much, it's more fuel load. As for that, I tend to, I like flowering plants, but everything I've been choosing, and this Q&A slide, those are all great examples of plants that don't need a lot of water. Oh, I take that back. That's red mustard up at the top from Veggie Garden. So that's something to think about. I'm trying to think what else to say about that. I realized some time ago as a geologist who absolutely adores and loves rock and thinks of rocks as stories, stories in a stone. It's been very easy to create rock gardens, and I'm on rocky ridge, so I have lots of plants that are thriving that don't take a lot of water. What other questions, Joan?
Actually, we're just about out of time, and if you can stop sharing your screen.
Sure.
For us.
Yeah.
And we'll try to answer these questions in an article that addresses most everything. I do want to say thank you to Doug and Marilyn for joining us today, and for those who joined in with your questions and just your viewing. It's a complicated subject. We knew we couldn't do everything in this hour, but we tried to give you the highlights, and hopefully that's inspired you to go out and take a look at your yard and your landscaping. I know I'm like really proud of my backyard. We put in pavers, and I have crepe myrtle. I don't have, I don't have any junipers, Marilyn, but I know I could do a lot of work in the front yard. I also have a redwood fence, so that's what they put in the housing development. So, but I don't have to go and do it all today. That's the important thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So again, thank you both, and I'm going to turn this back over to Charnel.
Yes, thank you, Joan and Doug and Marilyn. Thank you so much. The information you guys provided was very important and super informative. I think our audience really appreciates that. So thank you guys for joining us, and thank you to our audience for joining us as well. Just to let you know, if you're looking for those resources that Marilyn and Doug were referencing, you can find them in your chat right now. You'll also see the county alert system links as well. And it is just a full resource list of all the information that we talked about today. Also, I want to let you guys know about our upcoming events. We have American Musical Theater, Oh, Those Dancing Feet, coming up. It is a two-part series, and part one will be held on September 16th, and it'll focus on dancers and choreographers from 1930 to 1965. And then 2 weeks after that, we'll have a part two, and that will focus on the time 1965 to 2020. And that part two will be held on September 30th. Registration links will be up soon on our website, so please be on the lookout for those. And then also want to give you a reminder of our bookish series with our sister company, Southern California News Group. That will be held tomorrow at 5 p.m. So please be sure to register for that event if you haven't done so already.